You can't sit with us. Mom said you're a nobody." My 7-year-old niece, Maisie, rolled her eyes at me with a practiced disdain that no child her age should possess. The words hung in the air of my parents' cramped dining room in Omaha, and then the table erupted in laughter. My mother covered her mouth, shaking her head like this was the funniest thing she had heard all year. My father slapped his knee, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. And my sister, Vanessa, 25 years old and the source of that venomous little phrase, just smirked from across the table, her arm draped protectively around her daughter's shoulders. I stood there holding a casserole dish I had brought for Sunday dinner, the same dinner I had been attending for years, the same dinner I had been funding for longer than I cared to remember. The laughter continued, bouncing off the walls of a house whose rent I had been paying for the past 6 years. My name is Hazel, and I am 34 years old. I work as a logistics coordinator for a regional trucking company here in Omaha, a job that keeps me busy 60 hours a week and pays me well enough to afford my own apartment, my own car, and apparently my family's entire existence. For 6 years, I have been the invisible hand that keeps the lights on in this house, the groceries stocked in the pantry, and the landlord from knocking on their door with eviction notices. And for 6 years, I have been treated like I am somehow less than the people I support. Vanessa got pregnant at 18. She never finished community college, never held a job for more than 6 months, and never moved out of our parents' house. Maisie was the result of a brief relationship with a man who disappeared before her first birthday. And since then, my sister has made being a single mother her entire identity. Not the hard-working kind of single mother who struggles and sacrifices. No, the kind who expects everyone else to sacrifice for her, while she complains about how difficult her life is. My parents enabled every bit of it. They let Vanessa move back in after her brief attempt at independence failed. They let her stay rent-free while they struggled to make ends meet. And when their own financial problems became too much to bear, they turned to me. Not with gratitude or humility, but with expectation. As if it was my duty to clean up the mess they had created. I remember the first time my father asked me for money. He called it a loan. He said they were a little short that month and promised to pay me back. That was 6 years ago. The loan became a monthly payment. The monthly payment became an expectation. And somewhere along the way, my contribution stopped being appreciated and started being demanded. The casserole dish felt heavy in my hands as the laughter finally died down. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. My mother, who had not worked in 15 years and spent her days watching television and scrolling through social media. My father, who worked part-time at a hardware store and spent most of his paycheck on lottery tickets and beer. My sister, who had never contributed a single dollar to this household, but somehow felt entitled to look down on me. And Maisie, an innocent child who was being taught that cruelty was acceptable and that the person who helped you the most deserved the least respect. I set the casserole dish on the counter. I did not say a word. I simply turned around, grabbed my purse from the hook by the door, and walked out of that house. I heard my mother call after me. Something about being too sensitive. Something about learning to take a joke. I kept walking. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house I had been paying for. Away from the family I had been supporting. Away from the life I had been living for everyone but myself. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the silence both comforting and suffocating. My phone sat on the coffee table, and I stared at it like it might explode. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in my bones, the way you can feel a storm approaching before the first drops of rain begin to fall. The text came at 9:47 that evening. It was from my father, and it was exactly what I expected. "Hey, kiddo, just checking in. Payment's still due tomorrow, right? Rent is due on the 1st, and the landlord has been really strict lately." I read the message 3 times. There was no apology for what had happened at dinner. No acknowledgement that his granddaughter had called me a nobody while he laughed. No recognition that I had just been humiliated in front of my entire family. Just a reminder that my money was expected on schedule. Something inside me shifted. It was not anger exactly. It was something colder, something more final. It was the realization that I had been giving and giving and giving, and all I had received in return was disrespect, dismissal, and the expectation that I would continue to give until I had nothing left. I typed my response carefully, my fingers steady on the screen. "Figure it out." I hit send and set my phone face down on the table, For the first time in 6 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. I felt free. But I also knew that this was just the beginning, and the storm I had felt approaching was about to make landfall. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My phone had been buzzing all night, but I had turned off the sound and slept better than I had in years. I scrolled through the messages while drinking my coffee, watching the progression from confusion to concern to outright panic. The first few messages were from my father, trying to clarify what I meant. Figure what out? And, is this some kind of joke? Then came the messages from my mother, starting gentle and escalating quickly. Hazel, honey, please call us back. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Followed by, Hazel, this is serious. Your father is very upset. And finally, you cannot do this to us, after everything we have done for you. The irony of that last message was not lost on me, after everything they had done for me. I tried to think of what exactly that entailed. They raised me, yes. They fed me and clothed me and put a roof over my head until I turned 18. But so did every other parent in America. That was the bare minimum of their responsibility, not some extraordinary favor that entitled them to my financial support for the rest of my life. My sister's messages came later, around 3 a.m. She must have finally woken up and checked her phone. What the hell is wrong with you? And Mom and Dad are freaking out, and you need to fix this right now. Not a single word of apology, not a single acknowledgement that her daughter had humiliated me at their dinner table while she sat there and laughed. Just demands. Always demands. I thought about the years I had spent trying to keep this family afloat. The overtime I worked so I could send them extra money during the holidays. The vacations I never took because I could not afford to miss a paycheck when they were depending on me. The relationships I let wither because I was always too tired or too stressed or too focused on making sure everyone else was taken care of. I remembered the time Vanessa asked me to buy Maisie a new bicycle for her 5th birthday because she wanted to be the one to give it to her, but could not afford it. I bought the bicycle. Vanessa took all the credit. Maisie never knew that her aunt was the one who actually paid for it. That was the pattern. I provided, and they pretended like everything came from somewhere else. I was the machine in the background, expected to run quietly and never complain. My phone rang again. This time it was my father. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message he left. Hazel, I don't know what's going on with you, but we need to talk. The rent is due tomorrow and we don't have the money. We've been counting on you for this. You can't just back out now with no warning. Call me back. No warning. 6 years of paying their rent, and I was supposed to give them notice before I stopped. Like I was their landlord instead of their daughter. Like I owed them a formal resignation from the position of family ATM. I thought about calling him back. I thought about explaining everything I was feeling, all the hurt and resentment and exhaustion that had been building for years. But then I remembered Maisie's words, her tiny face twisted with contempt as she told me I could not sit with them. I remembered my mother's laughter, my father's tears of amusement, my sister's satisfied smirk, and I realized that explaining would not change anything. They did not see me as a person with feelings and limits. They saw me as a resource to be exploited. I deleted my father's voicemail without responding. The day passed slowly. I went to work, focused on my tasks, and tried not to think about what was happening back at my parents' house. But every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would clench. The messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. My mother called me selfish. My father called me ungrateful. My sister called me words I will not repeat. By the evening, the tone had shifted. The anger was still there, but it was tinged with something else. Fear. They were starting to realize that I was serious, that I was not going to swoop in and save them at the last minute like I always had before. They were starting to understand that the safety net they had taken for granted had been pulled away. I made myself dinner, a simple pasta with marinara sauce, and ate it at my kitchen table while reading a book. It was the most peaceful evening I had experienced in months. No phone calls about money problems, no texts about unexpected expenses, no guilt about whether I was doing enough for people who did nothing for me. But as I washed my dishes and prepared for bed, I knew that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow was the 1st of the month. Tomorrow, The rent was due. And tomorrow my family would finally have to face the consequences of treating me like I did not matter. I fell asleep that night with a strange mixture of emotions. Guilt, because I had been conditioned to feel responsible for them. Relief, because I had finally stopped pretending that their treatment of me was acceptable. And something else, something I had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could finally start living my life for myself. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:15. It was my father. This time I answered. "Hazel, what the hell is going on?" My father's voice was sharp with panic, a tone I had never heard from him before. He was usually so laid back, so unconcerned about anything that did not directly affect his comfort. But now, facing a problem he could not ignore, he sounded like a man watching his world collapse. "Good morning to you too, Dad," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. I had practiced this conversation in my head a dozen times during my sleepless moments the night before. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. "Don't give me that. You know what I'm calling about. The rent is due today and we don't have the money. You said you were going to figure it out, but you haven't sent anything. The landlord is going to be here at noon expecting payment." "And I told you to figure it out," I replied. "That means you need to find the money yourself." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother's voice in the background, asking what I was saying. My father shushed her impatiently. "Hazel, you can't be serious. We've been depending on you for years. You can't just cut us off without warning. That's not how family works." I felt something snap inside me at those words. That is not how family works. As if I was the one who had violated some sacred covenant. As if I was the one who had been taking and taking without ever giving anything back. "Family," I repeated slowly. "Let me tell you something about family, Dad. Family doesn't laugh when a 7-year-old calls you a nobody. Family doesn't teach that child to look down on the person who's been paying for everything. Family doesn't take your money every month and then treat you like you're invisible." "That was just a joke," my father said, his voice defensive now. "Maisie didn't mean anything by it. You're being way too sensitive about this whole thing." "A joke," I said. "Right. Tell me, Dad, who taught Maisie that I'm a nobody? Because 7-year-olds don't come up with that on their own. That came from somewhere, and we both know exactly where." Another pause. I could hear him breathing heavily, could picture him standing in the kitchen of that house, the phone pressed to his ear, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was stressed. "Look, we can talk about all of this later," he said finally. "Right now, we have a real problem. If we don't pay the rent today, the landlord said he's starting eviction proceedings. Do you understand what that means? We could lose the house." "Then I suggest you start making some phone calls," I said. "Maybe Vanessa could get a job. Maybe you could pick up extra shifts at the store. Maybe Mom could sell some of those things she's been buying on shopping networks for years. There are options, Dad. They just don't include me anymore." "You're going to let us get evicted?" His voice cracked on the last word. "Your own parents? Your own sister and niece?" I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been dreading. The moment when they would try to make me feel like the villain for refusing to be exploited any longer. I had to stay strong. "I'm not letting anyone do anything," I said. "I'm simply not paying for people who treat me like garbage. That's not abandonment. That's self-respect. Something I should have found a long time ago." My mother's voice came through the phone now, louder and more hysterical. She must have grabbed the receiver from my father. "Hazel, please. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to stop this right now. We're your family. We need you." "You need my money," I corrected her. "That's not the same thing as needing me. You made that very clear at dinner when everyone laughed while I was being humiliated. You've made that clear every single time you've taken what I offered without a word of thanks. I'm done, Mom. I'm done being the family ATM while being treated like the family disappointment." "We never treated you like that," she protested. "We love you. You know we love you." "Do I?" I asked. "Because love doesn't look like what I've been getting from this family. Love isn't being told I can't sit at the table because I'm a nobody. Love isn't having my contributions ignored while Vanessa gets praised for doing absolutely nothing. Love isn't being expected to sacrifice everything while receiving nothing in return. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought they might finally hear me, finally understand what they had done. But then my mother spoke again, and her words shattered any illusion of progress. "This is about jealousy, isn't it? You've always been jealous of Vanessa. Always been bitter that she has Maisie and you don't have anyone. Well, that's not our fault, Hazel. That's your choice." I laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you finally see something for exactly what it is, when the last scales fall from your eyes and the truth stands naked before you. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. "Good luck with the rent." I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or uncertainty. They were shaking from the sheer relief of finally saying what I had needed to say for years. I had stood up for myself. I had drawn a line in the sand. And no matter what happened next, I knew that I had made the right decision. My phone started ringing again almost immediately. I silenced it without looking at the screen. I had said everything I needed to say. Now it was time to let them face the consequences of their choices, the same way I had been facing the consequences of mine for 6 long years. The difference was that I had finally chosen myself. The first day of complete silence was the hardest. After I ended the call with my mother, I turned my phone completely off and left it in a drawer. I could not handle the constant buzzing, the endless stream of messages designed to guilt me into submission. I needed space to think, to process, to figure out who I was when I was not defined by my role as the family provider. I went to work that day and threw myself into my tasks with renewed energy. My job had always been something I was good at, something that made me feel competent and valued. The trucking company I worked for handled logistics for regional distributors, and my role involved coordinating schedules, managing routes, and solving problems when shipments went wrong. It was challenging work, but it was also work that people appreciated. When I did something well, my boss noticed. When I went above and beyond, I got recognition. It was such a stark contrast to my family life that I sometimes wondered why I kept going back to people who made me feel worthless when I could stay in a place where I felt capable. My coworker Tessa noticed something different about me that day. She stopped by my desk around lunchtime, a cup of coffee in her hand, and a curious expression on her face. "You seem different today," she said. "More relaxed. Did something happen?" I thought about how to answer that question. Tessa and I had worked together for 3 years, and while we were friendly, we were not exactly close friends. I had never talked to her about my family situation, never complained about the money I sent home every month or the way I was treated when I visited. It had always seemed too personal, too embarrassing to admit that my own family saw me as nothing more than a source of income. "I made a decision," I said finally. "A big one. I'm still processing it." Tessa nodded slowly, recognizing that I was not ready to share details. "Well, whatever it is, it looks good on you. You've got this energy today that I haven't seen before." After she walked away, I thought about what she had said. Energy. That was exactly what it felt like. For years, I had been walking around with a weight on my shoulders, a constant drain on my emotional and financial resources. Cutting myself off from my family had not solved all my problems, but it had lifted that weight. I felt lighter, freer, more like myself than I had in a very long time. When I got home that evening, I finally turned my phone back on. The notifications came flooding in like water through a broken dam. Voicemails, text messages, missed calls. I scrolled through them quickly, getting a sense of how the day had unfolded for my family. The morning had been filled with panic and accusations. My parents had apparently tried calling every relative they could think of, begging for money to cover the rent. No one had been able to help. Aunt Gloria, my mother's sister, had apparently told them that she had been expecting this for years, that anyone could see I was being used, and it was only a matter of time before I put a stop to it. That message from my mother was particularly bitter, accusing Aunt Gloria of turning me against them. By the afternoon, the tone had shifted from panic to desperation. My father had gone to the landlord and begged for an extension. The landlord, a man I had never met but had been paying for 6 years, had agreed to give them 1 week. 1 week to come up with the money or start packing their things. The evening messages were the ones that hurt the most. Maisie's face appeared on my screen in a video message, clearly recorded by my sister. The little girl's voice was sweet and confused as she said, "Aunt Hazel, Mommy says you're not going to help us anymore. Did I do something wrong? I'm sorry if I made you sad." It was manipulative, obviously. Vanessa had coached her to say those words, to use her daughter as a weapon to make me feel guilty. But despite knowing that, despite recognizing the tactic for what it was, it still hurt. Maisie was just a child. She did not deserve to be caught in the middle of this. She did not deserve to be used as a pawn by her mother. I almost caved. I almost picked up the phone and called them back, told them I would send the money, told them we could work things out. The pull of obligation was so strong, so deeply ingrained, that it took everything I had to resist it. But then I remembered what Maisie had said at the dinner table. "You can't sit with us. Mom said you're a nobody." Those words had not come from a child's imagination. They had been planted there by my sister, nurtured by my parents' indifference, watered by years of being treated like I did not matter. If I went back now, nothing would change. They would thank me for the money, promise to do better, and within a week, everything would be exactly the same. I would be the invisible provider again, good for my money, but not worthy of their respect. I deleted Maisie's video without responding. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but I knew it was necessary. I could not let myself be manipulated, not even by a child's voice. If I was going to break free from this family, I had to cut all the strings, even the ones that hurt. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by my window, watching the city lights of Omaha flicker in the darkness. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn my family's love through financial support. I thought about how futile that effort had been, how no amount of money had ever made them see me as anything more than a source of income. And I thought about what came next, about the life I might be able to build now that I was no longer carrying them on my back. The week ahead would be difficult. I knew that. My family would not give up easily. They would try every trick they knew to bring me back into the fold. But for the first time in 6 years, I felt ready to face them. I had finally found something stronger than my guilt, my self-respect, and I was not going to let them take that away from me. 3 days into my family's week of grace, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. I was just getting home from work when I saw Vanessa's car parked in my building's lot. My stomach dropped. She had never come to my apartment before. In all the years I had been helping them, not once had she made the effort to visit me. I was always expected to come to them, to drive the 20 minutes to their house and insert myself into their space. My home was irrelevant to them, just like I was. She was waiting by the front entrance, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been desperation. Maisie was not with her, which told me this was going to be a serious conversation. "We need to talk," she said as I approached. "I don't think we do," I replied, walking past her toward the door. Everything I needed to say, I already said. She followed me inside, despite my obvious lack of invitation. I did not have the energy to physically stop her, and part of me knew that this confrontation was inevitable. Better to get it over with now than to have it hanging over my head. My apartment was small but comfortable, a one-bedroom unit with a view of the park across the street. I had decorated it myself over the years, filling it with things that made me happy. Plants on every windowsill, bookshelves overflowing with novels, art prints on the walls that I had collected from local galleries. It was my sanctuary, the one place in the world where I could be myself without judgment. Vanessa looked around with barely concealed disdain. "This is where you live? It's so small." "It's mine," I said. "I pay for it with my own money, no one else's." The implication was not lost on her. She flinched slightly, then recovered her composure. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came here to try to understand what's going on with you. You've been helping Mom and Dad for years, and now suddenly you just stop. Without any warning? That's not fair." "Not fair," I repeated. "Let's talk about fair, Vanessa. Fair is when someone helps you, you say thank you. Fair is when someone pays your rent for 6 years, you show them some basic respect. Fair is not teaching your daughter to call that person a nobody, and then laughing when she does. If you want to talk about fair, let's start there. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. That was just a joke. Maisie didn't mean anything by it. You're making way too big a deal out of this. A joke, I said. That's what everyone keeps calling it. But here's the thing about jokes, Vanessa. They're supposed to be funny. What happened at that dinner wasn't funny. It was cruel. And it was a perfect summary of how this family has treated me for years. I'm good enough to pay for things, but not good enough to be treated with basic human decency. You're being dramatic, she said, but I could see doubt flickering in her eyes. She had never heard me speak like this before. I had always been the quiet one, the agreeable one, the one who kept her head down and did what was expected without complaint. Let me tell you something you might not realize, I continued. That bicycle you gave Maisie for her 5th birthday, I paid for it. That trip to the zoo last summer, I paid for it. The groceries that have been filling Mom and Dad's pantry every month, I paid for them. I have been supporting this family in ways you don't even know about because I was too afraid to ask for recognition. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to be a good daughter and a good sister. But all I got in return was being laughed at and looked down on. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. I could see her processing what I had said, trying to find a way to deflect or minimize it. But even she seemed to recognize that there was truth in my words. Okay, she said finally. Maybe things got out of hand. Maybe we should have been more grateful. But that doesn't mean you can just abandon us now. Mom and Dad could lose their house. Maisie could end up on the street. Is that what you want? What I want, I said slowly, is to be treated like a human being. What I want is for you to get a job and start contributing instead of expecting me to carry the entire family on my back. What I want is for Mom and Dad to take some responsibility for their own lives instead of depending on me for everything. Can you give me any of that, Vanessa? Or are you just here to convince me to keep writing checks? She did not answer, which was an answer in itself. I thought so, I said. You should leave. Vanessa stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. She was starting to realize that I was serious, that I was not going to back down, that the safety net she had taken for granted was truly gone. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. When this family falls apart, it's going to be on you. No, I replied. When this family falls apart, it's going to be because you all took me for granted for too long. I just stopped pretending that was okay. She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. I stood in my apartment, my heart racing, my hands trembling. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I had expected. But underneath the exhaustion, I felt something else. Pride. I had stood my ground. I had spoken my truth, and I had refused to let her manipulate me into going back to the way things were. I sank onto my couch and let out a long, shaky breath. This was really happening. I was really doing this. And no matter how scared I was of what came next, I knew that I could not go back to being the invisible provider, the family ATM, the nobody who paid for everything but mattered to no one. The end of the week arrived faster than I expected. I had spent the days trying to focus on work, trying to build some semblance of a normal routine, but the situation with my family was always there in the back of my mind. I checked my phone obsessively, watching as the messages shifted from angry to pleading to desperate. My father had apparently tried to get extra shifts at the hardware store, but there were none available. My mother had attempted to return some of the things she had bought over the years, only to discover that most of them were past the return window, or worth far less than she had paid. Vanessa had applied for a few jobs, but with no recent work history and no marketable skills, she was not getting any callbacks. By day 6, the landlord had sent a formal notice. They had until the end of the following week to pay the full amount or vacate the premises. 2 months of back rent, which they could not afford to begin with, plus the current month. A total that seemed impossibly large for a family that had become completely dependent on someone else's income. On the 7th day, my father called again. This time when I answered, his voice sounded different, smaller, humbler. The arrogance and entitlement that had been there before were gone, replaced by something that almost sounded like genuine remorse. Hazel, he said, I'm not calling to ask for money. I know you're not going to give it. I'm calling because I need you to know something." I waited, curious despite myself. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it's too little, too late. But I need you to hear it. We should never have treated you the way we did. You've been carrying this family for years, and we never even thanked you. That was wrong. I was wrong." I did not know what to say. In 6 years of supporting them, in 34 years of being their daughter, this was the first time my father had ever apologized to me for anything. The words I had wanted to hear for so long now felt hollow, like they were coming too late to matter. "Why now?" I asked. "Why apologize now when you're about to lose everything?" He sighed heavily. "Because losing everything made me realize what I had. Not the house, not the money. You. I had a daughter who loved us enough to sacrifice for us, and I never appreciated her. I never even saw her. I was so focused on what you could give us that I forgot to see who you were." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "That's a nice speech, Dad. But words don't change anything. You can say you're sorry, but what about Mom? What about Vanessa? What about Maisie, who was taught to look down on me by the people who should have taught her to love me?" "I know," he said. "I know it's not just about me. But I'm the one calling, because I'm the one who started this. I'm the one who asked you for that first loan 6 years ago, and I'm the one who let it become something that consumed your life. That's on me. And I'm trying, Hazel. I'm trying to make the others see what I see now. It's not easy. Your mother is still convinced that you're being selfish. Vanessa is angry and scared. But I'm working on them." I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe that this was the beginning of real change, that my family could finally see me for who I was, instead of what I could provide. But I'd been burned too many times to trust easily. "What happens next?" I asked. "With the house, I mean." "We're going to have to move," he said. "The landlord isn't going to budge, and we don't have the money. I've been looking at cheaper apartments, maybe something out in the suburbs. It won't be easy, but we'll figure it out. We have to." There was something in his voice that I had never heard before. Acceptance. He was finally facing the reality of his situation without expecting me to save him. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. "I'm glad you're figuring it out," I said. "I really am. But I need you to understand something, Dad. I'm not coming back. I'm not going to start paying your bills again just because you said sorry. This has to be permanent. You have to learn to stand on your own feet." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that we can be different, a chance to be the family you deserved all along." I did not know if he meant it. I did not know if my family was capable of real change, or if this was just another manipulation designed to bring me back into the fold. But for the first time since I had sent that fateful text message, I felt a glimmer of something that might have been hope. "We'll see," I said finally. "That's all I can promise right now. We'll see." I ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. The week was over. My family was facing the consequences of their choices, and I was facing the reality of a life without the constant burden of their expectations. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. But as I sat there in my quiet apartment, I realized something important. This was not about revenge. It had never been about revenge. It was about self-preservation. It was about finally recognizing my own worth and refusing to accept anything less than the respect I deserved. My family might change, or they might not. But either way, I was no longer going to sacrifice myself for people who could not see my value. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Omaha one more time. Somewhere out there, my family was scrambling to figure out their next move. But for the first time in 6 years, that was not my problem. I had my own life to build, my own future to create. And I was finally ready to start. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my life. Without the constant drain of supporting my family, I found myself with something I had not had in years. Money. Money that did not disappear the moment it hit my bank account. Money that I could actually save or spend on myself, or use to build the life I had always wanted. I started small. A new couch to replace the worn-out one I had been sitting on for years. Some clothes that actually fit well and made me feel good about myself. A weekend trip to Chicago, just because I could. Just because I had always wanted to see the city and never had the funds or the freedom to go. It was during that trip that I met someone who would become important to me. His name was Julian, and he was sitting at the coffee shop where I had stopped to rest my feet after a morning of sightseeing. We struck up a conversation about the book I was reading, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed. He was kind and funny and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He treated me like a person worth knowing, not a resource to be exploited. We exchanged numbers before I left Chicago, and in the weeks that followed, we talked every day. Long phone calls that stretched into the night, text messages that made me smile during my lunch breaks. For the first time in my adult life, I was experiencing what it felt like to have someone care about me without expecting anything in return. Meanwhile, my family's situation continued to deteriorate. They had moved out of the house I had been paying for and into a small apartment on the outskirts of Omaha. My father had managed to get a few extra shifts at the hardware store, but it was barely enough to cover their reduced expenses. My mother had started working part-time at a grocery store, a development that apparently caused no small amount of resentment and complaining. And Vanessa had finally gotten a job at a call center, her first real employment in nearly a decade. I kept my distance, but I heard updates through Aunt Gloria, who had become a surprising ally in all of this. She had apparently been watching my family take advantage of me for years, waiting for the day when I would finally stand up for myself. When that day came, she was ready to support me. "They're struggling," she told me during one of our phone calls. "But they're also learning. Your father seems genuinely changed. Your mother is coming around slower, but she's getting there. Vanessa is the holdout. She still blames you for everything." "Of course she does," I said. Taking responsibility has never been her strong suit. "Give it time," Aunt Gloria advised. "Some people need to hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. Vanessa hasn't hit hers yet." I thought about her words long after our call ended. Rock bottom. That was what my family had been heading toward for years, propped up only by my financial support. Now that the prop was gone, they were finally having to face reality. It was painful to watch, even from a distance, but it was also necessary. My relationship with Julian continued to grow. He came to visit me in Omaha a month after we met, and seeing him in my apartment, in my space, felt like something clicking into place. He was impressed by the life I had built, by the independence I had carved out for myself. He did not see me as someone who needed to be fixed or rescued. He saw me as someone worth choosing, just as I was. "You're remarkable, you know that?" he said one evening as we sat on my new couch, watching the sunset through my window. "Everything you've been through, and you're still here, still standing, still building." "I don't feel remarkable," I admitted. "Most days I just feel like I'm figuring it out as I go." "That's what remarkable looks like," he said. "It's not about having all the answers. It's about showing up anyway." I leaned into him, feeling safe and seen, in a way I had never felt with my own family. This was what I had been missing all those years. This was what I had been too busy supporting others to ever find for myself. Connection, respect, love that did not come with a price tag. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life in earnest. I got a promotion at work, a recognition of all the years I had devoted to my job. I started putting money into savings, watching my financial cushion grow for the first time ever. I made plans for the future that did not involve sacrificing myself for people who did not appreciate me, and slowly, painfully, my family began to change too. But that was their journey, not mine. I had my own path to walk now, and I was finally walking it with my head held high. 6 months after I stopped paying my family's bills, Vanessa finally reached out to me. It was not a text message or a phone call. It was a letter, handwritten on lined paper, mailed to my apartment like something from another era. I almost did not open it. I was not sure I was ready to hear whatever excuses or accusations she had to offer. But curiosity got the better of me, and I sat down at my kitchen table to read what she had written. "Dear Hazel," the letter began. "I don't know if you'll even read this, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I've been a terrible sister. I've treated you badly for years, and I made excuses for it instead of owning up to what I was doing. I'm not writing to ask for money or to try to manipulate you into coming back. I'm writing because I need you to know that I finally understand what I did, and I'm sorry. I read the letter 3 times, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. But the more I read, the more I realized that Vanessa was actually being honest. She wrote about her fear and insecurity, about how jealous she had always been of my independence and my ability to take care of myself. She admitted that teaching Maisie to look down on me had been a way of making herself feel better about her own failures. She acknowledged that she had been taking advantage of me for years, and that she did not deserve my forgiveness. I'm working now, she wrote. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm finally starting to understand what it means to earn something instead of just expecting it to be handed to me. I know that doesn't undo all the hurt I caused you, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the person you deserved all along. The letter ended with an invitation. Vanessa was having a small birthday party for Maisie at their new apartment. She was not expecting me to come, but she wanted me to know that I was welcome. Maisie had been asking about me, she wrote. The little girl did not fully understand what had happened, but she missed her Aunt Hazel. I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to dismiss it as another manipulation, but another part of me recognized something genuine in Vanessa's words. She was struggling, she was scared, and for the first time in her life, she was taking responsibility for her actions. I talked to Julian about it that night, asking for his perspective. He listened carefully to everything I said, then offered his thoughts. It sounds like she's really trying, he said. That doesn't mean you have to forgive her right away. It doesn't mean you have to go to that party or let her back into your life. But it might mean that change is possible. Real change. Do you think I should go? I asked. I think you should do whatever feels right for you, he said. But I also think that holding on to anger forever can become its own kind of burden. If there's a chance to heal, even a small one, it might be worth exploring. I thought about his words for days afterward. The anger I had carried for so long was starting to feel heavy, like something I was holding on to out of habit rather than necessity. My family had hurt me deeply, but they were also human beings capable of growth and change. Did I want to spend the rest of my life defined by what they had done to me? Or did I want to move forward, leaving space for the possibility of something better? In the end, I decided to go to Maisie's party, not because I had forgiven everything, not because I was ready to go back to the way things were, but because I wanted to see for myself whether the change was real. I wanted to give my family one more chance to show me who they could become. The party was small and modest, a far cry from the elaborate celebrations I had funded in the past. But there was something genuine about it, something real. Maisie ran to me the moment I walked in, throwing her arms around my legs and telling me she had missed me. My parents hugged me with tears in their eyes. Even Vanessa managed a genuine smile, though I could see the nervousness behind it. It was not a fairy tale reunion. There were awkward silences and unspoken tensions. But it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of a family that actually wanted me, not just my money. A year has passed since that night at my parents' dinner table, the night my niece called me a nobody, and I finally realized my own worth. So much has changed since then, that sometimes I barely recognize my own life. My family is still a work in progress. My parents have learned to live within their means, and my father has actually thanked me on multiple occasions for forcing them to become self-sufficient. My mother is slower to change, but even she has started treating me differently, with a respect that was never there before. And Vanessa, against all odds, has become someone I can almost call a friend. She has a job she is proud of, and she is raising Maisie to understand the value of hard work and the importance of treating people with kindness. Maisie herself has grown so much in this past year. She no longer sees me as the aunt her mother mocked. She sees me as someone who loves her, someone who shows up for birthday parties and school plays, someone who chooses to be there rather than being obligated to pay for things from a distance. Our relationship is still healing, but it is real in a way it never was before. Julian and I are still together. our connection deepening with each passing month. He moved to Omaha 6 months ago, wanting to be closer to me, and we are talking about the future in ways that fill me with hope. He has met my family and seen both their flaws and their potential for change. He supports me in setting boundaries and celebrates me when I prioritize my own needs. For the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to be loved unconditionally. My career has flourished as well. That promotion I received led to another, and I am now a senior manager at the trucking company, overseeing a team of coordinators and making decisions that actually matter. The money I no longer send to my family has gone into savings, investments, and experiences that enrich my life. I have traveled to places I only dreamed of visiting before. I have hobbies and friends, and a social life that does not revolve around other people's emergencies. But perhaps the most significant change is inside me. I no longer feel like a nobody. I no longer define my worth by what I can provide to others. I have learned that self-respect is not selfish, that boundaries are not abandonment, and that walking away from people who treat you badly is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself. My family faced real consequences for the way they treated me. They lost their comfortable home and had to rebuild their lives from scratch. They experienced the fear and uncertainty of not knowing how they would pay their bills or where they would live. They learned, the hard way, that taking someone for granted has a cost. But those consequences also pushed them toward growth, toward change, toward becoming the people they should have been all along. I do not regret what I did. I cannot regret choosing myself. As for me, I am finally living the life I always deserved. A life where I am seen and valued for who I am, not just what I can give. A life where my home is a sanctuary, my relationship is a partnership, and my future is something I get to choose. The girl who sat at that dinner table a year ago, holding a casserole dish while her family laughed at her humiliation, would barely recognize the woman I have become. Sometimes I think about that night, and what might have happened if I had stayed quiet, if I had paid the rent one more time, if I had continued to sacrifice myself for people who could not see my worth. I would still be the invisible provider, the family ATM, the nobody who paid for everything but mattered to no one. Instead, I chose a different path. I chose myself. Looking back now, I understand that revenge was never really the goal. What I wanted was freedom. Freedom from obligation, from expectation, from the crushing weight of other people's needs. And I found it, not by destroying my family, but by finally refusing to let them destroy me. My name is Hazel. I am 35 years old, and I am nobody's nobody anymore.